Welcome to Hidden Chapters. Every story here begins with a choice. One moment. One decision. This is what happened next. The coordinates were correct. The intelligence was clean. The target was approved. But I'd been there before. And I knew if we followed the order, something that shouldn't exist would disappear forever. The coordinates lit up on the screen like they always do. Cold. Precise. Final. Latitude. Longitude. Elevation. Everything matched. Satellite confirmation. Drone imagery. Signal intercepts. 3 independent sources. Clean intelligence. That should have been the end of it. I was standing inside a joint operations room somewhere south of the border, surrounded by people who trusted numbers more than memory. Screens hummed. Radios whispered. Coffee went cold. The strike window was tight. 12 minutes. This is the target, the analyst said, tapping the map. Confirmed hostile presence. Weapon storage. Command element. I leaned closer. And my stomach tightened. Not because of fear. Because of recognition. I'd seen that road before. The curve near the river. The uneven grid of buildings that never lined up right on satellite images. I'd driven through that place years earlier, in a different mission, under different rules. It wasn't a compound. It was a settlement. Small. Isolated. Easy to label wrong if you never set foot there. I said nothing at first. That's the rule. You don't challenge clean intel without proof. You don't inject memory into a process built on data. But then the drone feed updated. Children's footprints in the dirt near one of the structures. Clothes hanging between 2 walls. Details too small to matter to people who were already committed. The mission commander glanced at me. "You're quiet." "I've been there," I said. A pause. "Negative," the analyst replied without looking up. "No civilian record at that location." "Because no one bothered to record it," I said. Silence crept into the room. The clock kept counting down. "Strike authorization in 8 minutes," someone announced. I knew what was coming next. I'd seen it happen before. If I pushed too hard, I'd be removed from the process. If I stayed silent, the strike would go through. And if it went through, no report would mention the mistake. No correction would bring anything back. I looked at the screen again. Same coordinates. Same road. Same place where an old man once waved us through because he thought we were help. I made my decision before anyone could stop me. I reached for the console. And quietly, I changed one number. I didn't erase the target. That would have been noticed. I changed one digit in the elevation data. A small adjustment. Just enough to force a recalculation. Just enough to delay execution without triggering alarms. On paper, it looked like a system correction. In reality, it bought time. The countdown paused. Rerunning validation, the analyst muttered, already annoyed. Eyes stayed on screens. Fingers typed. No one looked at me. That's the strange thing about rooms like that. Everyone is surrounded by people, yet completely alone with their task. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Because once you act, the fear shifts. It stops asking if and starts asking how long. The drone feed refreshed again. Higher resolution this time. Someone had requested a closer look to confirm the anomaly. Bad timing. The image sharpened. Roofs made of patched metal. Uneven walls. No uniform layout. No perimeter fence. No hardened positions. Still, the system tried to make it fit. Possible concealment, the analyst said. Blending with civilian structures. Blending. That word can justify almost anything. I leaned forward. Request pattern of life review. The room hesitated. That'll take hours, the mission commander said. We don't have hours. You have minutes, I replied. And you're about to spend them explaining why. He turned and looked at me fully now. That look wasn't anger. It was calculation. You're confident? He asked. No, I said. I'm certain. Certainty is dangerous. But doubt is worse. The commander nodded once. Run it. The system began pulling archived feeds. Old satellite passes. Night imagery. Infrared sweeps from months back. Not enough to build a full picture, but enough to reveal habits. Movement at regular intervals. Smoke plumes in the morning. Light patterns that didn't match guard rotations. Someone whispered, that looks like cooking. No one laughed. The room shifted. Subtly. People leaned closer to screens. The tone changed from execution to examination. Then the alert came. External inquiry request. Priority channel. I felt it before I heard it. Someone higher had noticed the delay. The mission commander answered. Listened. His jaw tightened. Understood, he said. Yes. We're handling it. He cut the channel and looked at me again. They want the strike back on schedule, he said quietly. They're asking why it stopped. I met his eyes. Tell them the system flagged something. That won't hold forever. I don't need forever, I said. I need enough. Another pause. Then the analyst spoke again. We're seeing more heat signatures than expected. How many? The commander asked. Too many for a command element, she said slowly. And, inconsistent. Inconsistent. That's how the truth sneaks in. Not as proof. As discomfort. The countdown remained frozen. But I knew the clock hadn't stopped. It had just moved somewhere else. Because if I was right, I hadn't just delayed a strike. I'd put a spotlight on a mistake no one wanted to admit. And if I was wrong, I'd sabotaged an operation for nothing. Either way, when this ended, there would be consequences. And I was already standing in their path. They asked me how I knew. Not formally. Not yet. Just glances. A raised eyebrow. A pause that lingered too long. So I told them the part that mattered. 5 years ago, I said, keeping my voice steady, we passed through that area on a different operation. No strike. No clearance. Just movement. The room stayed quiet. It wasn't on any map, I continued. No grid reference. No record. Just a cluster of buildings near a river bend. People waved. Kids ran alongside our vehicles. The analyst frowned. There's no historical civilian data at those coordinates. That's because no one went back, I replied. And no one stayed long enough to log it. Memory doesn't count as evidence in rooms like this. But it plants doubt. And doubt slows things down. The drone feed shifted again, tighter now. Someone had pulled a different sensor layer. Shadows stretched across the ground as clouds passed overhead. Then we saw it. A figure stepping out from between two structures. Smaller than the others. Moving without urgency. Carrying something light. Not a weapon. Another followed. Then another. No perimeter response. No alert movement. No reaction to the drone overhead. Because they didn't know it was there. The analyst swallowed. That doesn't match hostile behavior. The mission commander leaned closer to the screen. Zoom in. The image sharpened. A narrow path worn into the dirt. Foot traffic. Daily use. You don't wear a path into the ground if you're hiding. You still confident? The commander asked me again. I didn't answer right away. Because confidence wasn't the problem anymore. Recognition was. I saw the place clearly now, not as pixels, but as memory. A man repairing a fence with wire that didn't quite match. A woman standing in a doorway, watching us like she didn't trust the road anymore. An old truck that never moved. I remembered stopping briefly. Handing out water. Being waved through. I remembered thinking how easy it would be to erase a place like that. Sir, I said finally, if that strike goes through, there won't be anything left to investigate. The room stayed silent. Then the analyst's console chimed. New data point. Signal intercept, she said. Low power. Short range. Not encrypted. What kind of signal? The commander asked. She hesitated. Emergency band. Civilian grade. That shouldn't have been there. The system had labeled the location as hostile because something near it was dangerous. A relay node. A mobile element passing through. The algorithm didn't care what else was nearby. It never does. The commander straightened. Hold strike authorization. A breath moved through the room. Almost relief. Then another alert flashed. Override request pending. Higher command. Someone didn't like the pause. The commander looked at me one more time. If this turns out to be wrong. I know, I said. He nodded once. You'd better be. As the override timer started counting down, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. Even if we stopped this strike. Whoever had moved through that settlement had marked it. And marks don't fade. They wait. The override timer glowed in the corner of the screen. 3 minutes. That's how long it would take for someone far away, someone who had never seen the place, never walked that road, to decide the pause had gone on long enough. The mission commander stood still, hands on the table, eyes locked on the map. He wasn't looking for new information anymore. He was weighing risk. Not operational risk. Political risk. Run a full historical sweep, he said suddenly. The analyst hesitated. Sir, that'll flag. I know, he replied. Do it. Keyboards came alive. Systems reached back through years of archived data, pulling fragments no one usually bothers to examine. Old satellite passes. Weather imagery. Agricultural surveys. Things not meant for targeting. The override timer ticked down. 2 minutes. A pattern began to emerge. Not sharp. Not definitive. But human. Smoke in the mornings, not at night. Movement at dawn and dusk. No defensive posture, even when vehicles passed nearby. This isn't a base, the analyst said quietly. It's lived in. The word settled heavy in the room. The commander nodded slowly, then keyed his mic, requesting strike suspension pending verification. The reply came instantly. Negative. Window is closing. Proceed. The override timer hit 1 minute. That's when I realized something important. Stopping the strike here wouldn't be enough. Even if command delayed it, the location would stay flagged. It would be reviewed again. Reinterpreted. Labeled differently. Sooner or later, someone else would sign off. I leaned toward the console again. You can't keep doing this, the commander warned. I'm not, I said. I pulled up the secondary target list, support nodes tied to the original threat. Mobile relays. Temporary storage sites. Places that were empty. I shifted the priority weighting. Just slightly. The system responded instantly, recalculating probabilities, reshuffling importance. The red outline jumped, not far, just far enough. The override timer froze. "What did you do?" the analyst asked. "I gave them a better option," I said. "One that won't raise questions." The commander stared at the screen. Then at me. "That location is real," I said. "And it's active." He exhaled slowly. The override request vanished. Strike authorization rerouted. The room didn't celebrate. No one spoke. They just watched as the new target locked in and the system moved on, satisfied. But I wasn't. Because saving that settlement on paper didn't mean it was safe. It meant it had been noticed. And in places like this, being noticed is sometimes worse than being destroyed. As the operation shifted focus, I kept my eyes on the original coordinates. A quiet place. Unrecorded. Still alive. For now. And I wondered how long that would last. Once the wrong people realized it had been spared. The strike went through somewhere else. Clean execution. Approved target. No delays. The room relaxed in the way it always does after a decision gets made for you. People leaned back. Coffee was refilled. Screens shifted to post-strike assessment. I didn't move. Because while the system was satisfied, I wasn't. I kept my eyes on the original coordinates, the place that no longer glowed red, no longer mattered to the algorithms. It looked harmless now. Quiet. Unimportant. That's the danger. Places like that don't survive because they're protected. They survive because no one thinks they're worth the effort. Until someone does. The mission commander stepped closer to me. His voice stayed low. "You understand what you did?" "Yes," I said. "You didn't just delay a strike. You redirected attention." "I know." He studied my face, then nodded once. "Then you also know what happens next." I did. Someone would review the logs. They'd see the pause. They'd see the reroute. They wouldn't accuse anyone outright. They'd just start asking questions. And questions are how mistakes get corrected. The analyst cleared her throat. "Sir, there's movement. On the original feed." We all turned back. A vehicle, old, slow, rolled along the dirt path near the settlement. Not tactical. Not cautious. It stopped near one of the structures. Two figures stepped out. No weapons. No urgency. The commander frowned. "Why are they out in the open?" "Because they don't know," I said. They didn't know they'd almost disappeared. They didn't know how close the line had been. I felt something tighten in my chest, not guilt. Responsibility. If that place was spared today, it was only because I was there. Because I remembered. Because I acted. What happens when I'm not? The analyst spoke again. Secondary intercepts suggest hostile movement along the river corridor. Mobile. Unpredictable. That explained it. The settlement hadn't been the target. It had been collateral, close enough to something dangerous to be misread. But misreads have consequences. I leaned toward the commander. If hostile elements are moving through that corridor, this will come up again. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You're suggesting a follow-on." "I'm suggesting verification," I replied. "On the ground. Quiet. That's not scheduled." "It won't be," I said. "And it shouldn't be visible." The commander looked around the room. At the people. At the screens. At the systems that had nearly erased a place by accident. Finally, he said, "I'll make inquiries." That was all I'd get. As the operation wrapped and teams began to cycle out, I took one last look at the feed. The vehicle drove away. The figures disappeared inside. The settlement returned to being invisible. For now. But I knew something had changed. Because once you interfere with a system like that, it remembers you. And sooner or later, it asks you to answer for it. The inquiry never came. That worried me more than if it had. For 3 days, nothing changed. No messages. No requests for clarification. No quiet summons to explain why the timeline didn't line up the way it should have. The system doesn't forget. It waits. On the 4th morning, the mission commander found me in the corridor outside the operations room. No uniform changes. No formal tone. That alone told me this wasn't official. "You were right," he said. "I didn't ask about what. I already knew." "Movement confirmed along the river corridor," he continued. "Not permanent. Rotational. Using civilian routes for cover." "And the settlement?" I asked. He hesitated. "They're in the shadow of it. Close enough to be convenient. Far enough to deny." That was the worst place to be. A pause settled between us. "We're authorizing a low-visibility assessment," he said. "No strike package. No public tasking. Just eyes." I looked at him. "You want me involved?" "Yes." That was the consequence. Not punishment. Responsibility. We inserted at night, small footprint, no identifiers. The kind of movement that doesn't show up unless someone is already looking. The land smelled the same as I remembered, wet soil near the river, smoke drifting from cooking fires. We stopped short of the settlement and observed. It was exactly as before. No guards. No perimeter. Just life. A woman carried water from the river. A man repaired a roof with materials that didn't quite fit. Children moved between structures, careful but not afraid. That mattered. Through optics, I saw something else. Fresh tracks. Not from the village. Heavy boots. Vehicle weight. Passing through, not stopping. The hostile element wasn't based there. They were using it. That distinction would never show up in a targeting packet. We followed the tracks upstream. Less than a kilometer away, the truth surfaced, temporary positions hidden in vegetation, equipment cached and moved regularly, radio traffic bouncing through civilian-grade relays. Smart. Careful. Invisible unless you were already suspicious. I reported back. "This is your threat," I said quietly into the mic, mobile. "Embedded near civilians but not part of them." The response was immediate. "Confirmed. New targeting solution pending." I looked back toward the settlement. "Not there," I said. "Anywhere but there." The reply came after a beat. "Understood." For the first time since this started, I felt something loosen in my chest. We hadn't just delayed a mistake. We'd corrected it. As we exfiltrated before dawn, I watched the settlement one last time. Smoke rose gently from a fire. Someone laughed, brief, unguarded. They had no idea how close they'd come to being erased. And they never would. That's the goal. Not recognition. Not credit. Just making sure the wrong target stays wrong. Even when no one is watching. The correction didn't end the problem. It shifted it. Once the mobile element was identified, the system moved fast. Too fast. New maps. New models. New urgency. When a mistake is caught, the instinct is to prove competence by acting decisively. That's how overcorrections happen. I watched the updated targeting package come together from a distance this time. Different analysts. Different commander. Same confidence. The new target sat upriver, far enough from the settlement to satisfy policy. On paper, it was clean. A temporary staging site. No civilian indicators. But something felt wrong again. Not memory this time. Pattern. The hostile group moved constantly. They didn't stay long enough to justify fixed strikes. They flowed through terrain, borrowing cover from whoever lived nearby, then disappearing. You don't hit water with a hammer. I raised the concern quietly. Not formally. Not on record. They won't be there long enough, I said to the mission commander. You'll hit ground they've already abandoned. And if we don't, he replied. They'll keep using civilians as camouflage. That was the trap. Strike too early, you miss them. Strike too late, you hit something else. I realized then that the system wasn't designed for this kind of enemy. It wanted permanence. Labels. Clean boxes. This enemy lived between boxes. The operation proceeded anyway. No missiles this time. A smaller footprint. Controlled. Precise. When the assessment came back, the results were unclear. No confirmed hostiles. No secondary explosions. No obvious failure. Just absence. They moved, I said. No one argued. That's when the secondary report arrived. Movement near the settlement again. Not the hostile group. People. Displacement. Families packing what they could carry. Structures going dark at night. Fires no longer lit openly. Fear. Even without a strike, the pressure had reached them. I felt something settle heavy in my chest. Saving a place once doesn't mean it stays saved. The mission commander joined me at the screen. You think they know? They feel it, I said. That's enough. He exhaled slowly. We can't secure every place. No, I agreed. But we can stop making them targets. That night, I wrote a report that wouldn't change policy but might slow it. I stripped language. Removed urgency. Made the area look unremarkable. Boring. Sometimes boredom is protection. Weeks later, the settlement stopped appearing in briefings. Not because it was resolved. Because it was forgotten again. That's when I knew the real cost of interfering. You don't get thanked. You don't get closure. You just carry the knowledge that somewhere, a place exists in peace not because it was defended. But because it was ignored. Time passed the way it always does after something almost happens. Quietly. Unevenly. The settlement faded from screens and briefings, replaced by newer concerns, louder threats. Different rivers. Different roads. The system moved on, satisfied it had corrected itself. That was the distance. Physical distance is easy. You board a plane, you cross borders, you change time zones. Mental distance is harder. I still saw that place when I closed my eyes. Not as a target. As a pattern. A reminder of how thin the margin really is. Months later, a routine intelligence update crossed my desk. No priority flag. No urgency. Just data. Infrastructure development in the region. A road extension proposal. Increased commercial traffic. Normal things. But normal things changed the map. I pulled the imagery again. Out of habit. Out of caution. The settlement was still there. Larger now. A few new structures. Clearer paths. Evidence of trade, not movement under fear. The riverbank showed signs of use that weren't temporary anymore. Stability. It was the first time I allowed myself to believe it might last. A colleague glanced at my screen. You know that place? I do, I said. Looks quiet, he replied. Probably nothing. Probably. That word has ended more lives than certainty ever has. I closed the feed and stood up. Walked away before I could look again. Some things don't need constant watching. Watching can turn into attention. Attention can turn into danger. That's another lesson you don't learn in training. The safest place on a map is sometimes the one no one remembers to mark. Weeks later, I received a short message. Not official. Not signed. Good call. That was it. No context. No follow-up. I deleted it immediately. Because acknowledgements create trails. And trails lead back to places that are better left alone. That night, lying awake, I thought about the choice I'd made in that operations room. One number. One small change. People imagine moments like that feel dramatic. They don't. They feel quiet. Almost ordinary. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because the next time the coordinates light up, the system will expect the same obedience. And it won't know the difference between a correction and a conscience. I was reassigned shortly after. No explanation. No ceremony. Just a shift in focus, like the system gently nudging me away from places where memory interfered with efficiency. That's how it protects itself. The work didn't change much. New regions. New coordinates. New screens lighting up with the same certainty I'd learned to distrust. But I did. I checked things twice now. Sometimes 3 times. Not because I didn't trust the intelligence, but because I understood what it couldn't see. Patterns don't show people. Only presence does. One evening, while reviewing a routine package, I caught myself hesitating again. A familiar pause. The same instinct rising. I stopped. Not this time. The target was clean. Truly clean. No ambiguity. No shadow of doubt. I let it proceed. And afterward, nothing happened. No regret. No second thoughts. No quiet ache in my chest. That's when I realized the weight wasn't about guilt. It was about responsibility. Knowing that once you intervene, you don't get to stop caring. You don't get to choose when your conscience applies. The settlement stayed quiet. At least on paper. No reports. No indicators. No need to look again. But sometimes, in the middle of unrelated briefings, I'd catch myself wondering if the road had held. If the river still ran clear. If the people there had learned to trust the quiet, or if they were still waiting for the sky to decide something about them. I never checked. Some knowledge protects. Some knowledge threatens. And I had already used mine once. The system doesn't reward that. It absorbs it. Turns it into a footnote. A minor anomaly in a log file no one reads twice. But I read it. Every time a new set of coordinates appeared, I remembered that place. Not because it was special. Because it wasn't. And that's what almost destroyed it. Years later, I can still picture the screen. The coordinates. The clean intelligence. The certainty everyone else felt. People assume the hardest part was changing the data. It wasn't. The hardest part was accepting that I might be wrong, and acting anyway. Nothing ever came back to that settlement. No follow-up operations. No quiet corrections. No second looks disguised as routine reviews. It stayed exactly where it belonged. Unimportant. And that's why it survived. I never told anyone the full story. Not because I was afraid of consequences, but because once a story becomes official, it stops being careful. It gets simplified. Justified. Reused. That place didn't need to become an example. It needed to remain invisible. Every system has a line it doesn't want crossed. Not a rule. A comfort zone. A place where numbers matter more than memory, and certainty matters more than doubt. I crossed that line once. Not loudly. Not heroically. Just enough. I didn't save the world. I didn't stop a war. I didn't change policy. I stopped one mistake. And sometimes, that's the most anyone can do. The system moved on. It always does. New threats replaced old ones. New maps overwrote the last. Somewhere, another operations room hummed with confidence. But every time I see coordinates light up now, I pause. Not to challenge them. Not to interfere. Just to remember that behind every perfect square on a screen, there might be something the system never learned to see. A road. A river. A place that exists only because no one erased it. That's the part you won't find in reports. The moment when doing nothing would have been easier. And doing something quietly mattered more. That's the hidden chapter. And it's still there. If this story stayed with you, there are many more like it on this channel. You can like the video and subscribe if you want to hear the next hidden chapter. And if you were there, what choice would you have made? See you soon. Bye.